It's good day to brew, baby. What is up, YouTube? It's your boy Millsy. Back to Home Talk Commander, back for another episode of Millsy Brews, the show where I take my first pass at the commander in front of us on a budget on my quest to brew the magic world. You know the motto, baby. It's ABB, always be brewing. That's what we're back to do today. The deck list is going to be down in the description for you below. So I'd really appreciate it if you could interact with the video, like, comment, subscribe, consider doing all that YouTube stuff. I'd appreciate it. But today, we're walking through Edge of Eternity's content, and with all the most with the most recent two sets, Final Fantasy and Edge of Eternities, we've actually gotten given a few new Leviathans, and so I wanted to go back and take a look at Kiora, Sovereign of the Deep again. A 5-mana Simic 4/5 commander, Vigilance of Ward 3. Whenever we cast a Kraken, Leviathan, Octopus, or Serpent spell from our hand, we can look at the top X of our library, where X is that spell's mana value, and we can cast a spell with a mana value or X or less from among them without paying its mana cost and put the rest on the bottom. So you're basically getting Discover, but the only difference is instead of putting it in your hand, you have to pick one, right? You don't get the option. You basically have to cast one. But with all of our sea monsters being pretty high up on the mana scale, we should be able to find something pretty good. I mean, I believe the average sea monster is about 6 or 7 mana. So we're going to be able to find a lot of good things when we start digging. And there's a lot of ways that we can approach that. Truthfully, we're going to try to ramp up, reduce the cost of our sea monsters, but we're going to try to get them in, try to cheat more of them in, and then try to take over with just very large creatures and just hitting over in many different ways. But I want to thank you to the channel members. Thank you so much for supporting the channel. If you're interested in seeing all of our videos just a little bit earlier for just $1 a month and support the channel, consider checking us out down below. Well, all right. Those are the 4 types listed on Kiora. I'm calling them sea monsters because a lot of them are like kraken, serpents, octopus, right? Our sea monsters. I mean, you can argue that the leviathans are and aren't because leviathans used a lot of time for these space monsters, but we have a lot of different creatures at our repertoire. AC is a landfall outlet, allowing us to draw cards when lands come in. Arachnoseas comes in as a land when you play it, tap with 5 slumber counters on it. Whenever you cast a spell, you remove a slumber counter on it, and then once you get all them off, it's a big 12/12. Benthic Anomaly says whenever you cast it for each opponent, you choose a creature that player controls. You create a token of one of them, except its power is equal to the total power of all those creatures, and its toughness is equal to the total toughness of all those creatures, and it's an Eldrazi. It's a really interesting ability and can be really fun depending on what your opponents have. Just getting a huge creature and being 7 mana 7/8 ain't bad either. Brineland can bounce non-land permanents to its owner's hand whenever we cast a spell with mana value 6 or greater, which is again most of our sea creatures. So that's great. We can start bouncing our opponent's key things back to our hand. We'll get into a couple new Leviathans. Famished Worldsire, a big 8/8/0/0 with Ward 3, has Devour Land 3. So when it comes in, we can sacrifice any number of lands. It enters with 3 times that many counters on it. So the good part about our deck is we should end up having a few extra lands if we're getting to Worldsire by turn 6 or 7 or whatever we choose to play it. So I don't think we're going to mind sacking 1 or 2. And when it comes in, we look at the top X where X is its power and put a number of lands from among them on the battlefield tapped and then shuffle. This is again really nice because it could potentially, depending on how many cards we go deep, basically just pay for all the lands we devoured, right? Basically putting them back in and not having to worry about it. And then you've got a big Ward 3 Leviathan. Glacier Godmob Aegis be an uncommon 7 mana 6/6. But whenever it comes in, you get the lander token. Remember, the lander token's new. You sack it to go get a basic land from your library. But whenever a land comes in, all our creatures get +1/+1 in vigilance and haste. This is a huge ability, and I think could be really interesting. I think what it's going to do most of the time is have you play that big spell for the turn with Cure out first, get that ability, get those creatures in, and then play the land, give them vigilance and haste to be able to get in. This is a nice Leviathan. The sad part, this is only an uncommon, and I think this does some really great value in our deck. Grappling Kraken from Foundations. Whenever a land comes in, we just tap down an opponent's creature and put a stun counter on it. It may not be super killer, but it's good to know that like this sea monsters archetype is getting support. This is a conversation I had a lot when we went back to Ixalan for Lost Caverns of Ixalan, which was that you had a couple of these tribes that had good support, right? Like, for example, I think specifically with dinosaurs and pirates, these were 2 tribes that they had support, but they needed more support. And this set came in and just raised the floor of what was a good sea monster. And that's what I think is currently happening is the floor of a sea monster is going up over time. And our choices are just getting better and better, that even a couple uncommons look half decent, right, in our deck. Hullbreaker Horror can bounce things back to our opponent's hands or our hand, depending on what we choose whenever we cast spells. I really like that. Again, going to be very good when we're trying to cast 2 or 3 a turn. We're playing both Comas. The old Coma comes in and then makes a 3/3 Coma Coil on everybody's turn. We can sack the Coma Coils to tap something down and prevent its activated abilities from being activated, or give it indestructible. And then the new one, a big 8/12 with Trample and Ward 4, that when it hits somebody makes some Coma Coils. Both of them are very good. Obviously, Cosmos Serpent, the original one, does a little better at interacting with the board, whereas World Eater is just a very difficult card to deal with. Monstrosity of the Lake, a 5 mana 4/6. When it comes in, we could pay 5. If we do, we tap all creatures our opponent control and put stun counters on them. So for 5 mana, we just get a 4/6. For 10 mana, right, we basically tap down all our opponent's creatures and maybe we can take a big attack and really hurt them. We can also island cycle this away if we need to. Nimbus Swimmer may not look like a lot. It's just a X spell that comes in with counters on it. But what I think this is really important about this deck is we get to set the value of X. Meaning mid to late game, I mean, you could just go deep for like 10 on the X of the Swimmer and just go look through the top 10 of your library and maybe get something really good, right? I like that this is going to depend on when we see it, to like how deep we're going to go and how much value we can get off the Swimmer. Scourge of Fleets, whenever it comes in, we return each creature our opponent control with toughness X or less, where X is the number of islands we control. So we could potentially bounce tokens or some small creatures, or big creatures, depending on how many islands we have. Yawning Death Depths is gonna help us out a lot. Prevents all of our sea monsters basically from being blocked, except by sea monsters. Gonna make them nearly unblockable, and all of them are decent bodies that are really gonna hit our opponents hard. Slin Voda, big 8 mana 8/8, but if we kick it, we return all creatures back to their hands except for these sea monsters. Merfolk are included in that as well, but either way, Slin Voda is going to be a huge way to bounce our opponent's things back to our hands and hopefully get one of these nice one-sided board wipes. Spawning Kraken, whenever one of our sea monsters hit an opponent, we make a 9/9 Kraken token. That is a huge token, and it's not going to take very many of them to hopefully take over a game, especially if we can give them trample and things like that. Pair of a couple new Leviathans, Starwinder from Edge of Eternities. Whenever creature we control goes coming to a player, we can draw that many cards. A very interesting ability. Also, the warp option is interesting. Warping it in with haste, letting it attack, and then going to exile to be replayed again. Note that if we warp it, we don't get to get Kiora's trigger, but the nice thing about Starwinder's ability is it doesn't even have to hit for its ability. Other things can hit, right? So I think that's almost equally as beneficial, because then Starwinder doesn't have to attack. It can just come in, get the Kiora trigger, and then do some good work. Summon Leviathan comes in, again, bounces all those non-sea monsters back to our hand and their owner's hands. And then on 2 and 3, can draw us cards when our sea monsters attack. Again, Final Fantasy producing some really interesting saga creatures, and this is so good for us as another, hopefully, just completely one-sided board wipe. The nice thing to remember here is this does include Merfolk. Same thing with Slin Voda. So this is going to protect Kiora from being bounced. But, I mean, hopefully it just continually bounces all our opponent's things and we don't have to worry about that. But I think what we want to do is try to find more value from this game plan. We don't want to just play big thing and bonk. As much as that's what we want to do, we want to try to get more from it. Kiora can draw some extra cards when we have creatures with power 4 or greater come in. Emoti gives all of our creatures, all of our spells we cast with mana value 6 or greater Cascade. So Cascade differs a little bit from Kiora's ability. Cascade says you exile from the top until you hit a spell that costs less than it, and you pay that without paying its mana cost. Now, you don't have to. If you don't, everything just goes back to the bottom. So it's not like we get to look at the top X and choose. We're kind of forced into the first thing we hit. But I mean, if you think about it, if you have Kiora and Emoti out, you get both of those triggers. You can do them whatever order you want to, and you're still just getting a ton of value. Thrix is going to make them a little bit cheaper and prevent them from being countered. This is really nice to allow us to make sure we're hitting some really good things off of it. Whelming Wave is going to bounce all of those non-sea monster creatures back to their hand. Note this will bounce Kiora, but I don't think we mind. I think if we're going to bounce an entire board back of creatures back to their opponent's hands, I think we can give up Kiora for it. Spend it a little bit on the Great Henge would just show you that the budget of this deck would be about $60 cheaper if we didn't have a Great Henge in it. But just allows you to draw some cards and grow your creatures when they come in. Great Henge is a great piece of support for you if you have the money for it. If you don't, replace it with something else. This deck becomes $60 cheaper, and I think you'd be perfectly fine for it. But a card I think plays really well in the deck, and this is a card that I've kind of cut my teeth on with Pantlaza from that Lost Caverns Ixalan set, is Cream of the Crop. So whenever a creature comes into play, you can look at the top X of your library where X is its power, and put one of them on the top and put the rest on the bottom. So basically what we're going to do here is try to set up our next play. Because if we go back to Kiora really quick, this is a cast trigger, right? So Cream of the Crop may look a little odd because this is an enters trigger, whereas Kiora is a cast trigger. But what I think is interesting with Cream of the Crop is we can either set up the next spell we cast, or what we could do is think about it in the sense that in the early to mid game when we're playing our things, we're just going to be digging through and trying to find the key pieces to set up our next draw. There's a lot of ways you can look at the Cream of the Crop. Again, it's not as good as when you're using it in Pantlaza, where you can jump the Discover trigger and put the right thing you want on top. But I think Cream of the Crop is still very useful for what it's trying to do. Kozilek's Unsealing, when we cast a creature spell with mana value 4, 5, or 6, we make a couple spawns that can sack for colorless mana. And whenever we cast a creature spell with mana value 7 or greater, we draw 3 cards. Go away, replace things in our hand, and keep things moving. Monstrous Vortex gives every creature with power 5 or greater, we cast Discover X, where X is that spell's mana value. Again, this is very similar to Cascade. The only difference is instead of casting it without paying its mana cost, we can also put it into our hand. So again, not like Kiora's trigger, right, where we get to kind of look at the top X. We just take the first one that's X or less, and then we can either cast it or put it into our hand. So again, just adding more of these cast triggers, more of this value to the sea monsters we're casting. Up the Beanstalk, and we cast a spell, mana value 5 or greater, draw a card. Good way to refill our hand, make sure we have lots of pieces. But I think, right, we're going to end the game in combat. So let's give a great way for us to do that. Things like Overwhelming Stampede and Triumph, these Alpha Strike abilities are going to allow us to take a big swing in the turn, give them Trample, make sure they're hitting hard. Triumph gives them Infect, a good way to potentially help close the game out that way. Season of the Gathering, I think, kind of plays a dual role. You can give a bunch of creatures Vigilance and Trample and a counter if you want to. You can sweep the board of artifacts or enchantments, or you can draw some cards. But I think at minimum, you're giving 5 creatures Vigilance and Trample and a counter just to take a big attack at your opponents. Things like Garruk's Uprising are going to always give them Trample and then draw us a card when they come in, which is a nice ability. Sphere Grid, as soon as they hit an opponent, you put a counter on them, and then they have Trample as long as they have counters on them, is a nice ability, especially when we can potentially get hits on opponents over multiple turns. And then Return of the Wild Speaker can either draw us a bunch of cards or give all of our creatures +3/+3. Depending on the scenario, I guess it'll depend on what you choose. I mean, the card draw is nice, and so is the buff, right? And so it can really determine when we use it. But hey, I mean, especially if we have an open board, right? One of those one-sided board wipes, +3/+3 can make a big old difference. But I've said it before on the show, and I'll say it again. No deck's ever complete. Although we've covered Kiora before on the channel, we still have things to learn. And going into testing, I think we've made some good changes to the deck from the last time we've took a look at it. But there's always things to learn. I thought of something like Leyline Immersion for Kiora, so Kiora can actually tap for mana and get Ward 2. This seems kind of interesting, right? Allowing her to tap for paying for our spells, making sure we probably maybe cast 2 in a turn instead of 1, right? Tapping for 5 mana, and giving some of that protection. Hadana's Climb's a really interesting one, so start a combat of our turn, we can put a counter on a creature we control, that if we have 3 or more counters, this turns into a land that can tap to give a creature +X/+X and flying, can basically make one of our sea monsters really good. It was really hard to cut Hadana's Climb because it's a card I really like. But I was trying to make sure our cast value was consistent, and then we can come back in and deal with some of these utility cards later. But let's do what we love to do on this channel the most and get into our playtest. Remember, the goal of playtest on our channel is not to find magical Christmas land. It's not just to show off all our best plays, but it's to get in some gameplay scenarios and kind of understand what are the hands we're looking to keep and how are we going to set up our game plan. Might look a little awkward as a 2-laner, but we got 2 pieces of ramp, which is really nice. We have Goreclaw that reduces all of our big creatures by 2, so that's going to help them come down easier. We'll also reduce Kiora as well. And then Serpent, right, the unblockable, and Tomocratus says it has hexproof as long as attacker blocking. It can't be blocked unless all creatures defending opponent, player controls block it. So a very interesting attacker. Be ideal to draw land, but either way, we're going to be okay. We do draw one in the Verge. I'd rather wait on the bridge if I don't have to. Remember, the bridge can help us get a creature down for cheaper, but I think I'm just going to go for the 3 visits and just go take another, duel into our deck and get it down. It's kind of a bummer because if you think about it that way, we have to take the turn off here. But I think I'll just play the bridge. This has me hide away the top 4. And then whenever creature's power 10 or greater, we can cast the thing. Heroic Intervention could be good as a way to just hold up some protection, right? Make sure that we know we have some protection locked away. And I think I'm just going to Kadama's Reach here. Just go ahead and get some lands in, make sure we have access to some more things. So this turn, I can slam Kiora. Now, if I go for Goreclaw, it's going to help reduce everything later. Because my thought is, if I go for Goreclaw plus something like Arithmeses, it comes down for just 2 mana, but remember, it comes in tapped with the 5 counters on it. And it can grow, right, over the course, it goes down right as we cast the spells, and then it can become a 12-12. And the reason that is because it's still a creature in our hand. So Goreclaw is going to reduce it by 2, but again, it comes in as a land. So as we come into our next turn, we've got 4, 6, 8 mana because we can tap the Arithmeses to cast something. Kiora is only coming in for 3 because of Goreclaw's ability. So that would leave us with 5 mana left. Serpent would be 4. So we could go Kiora into Serpent, which doesn't feel like, or Tomocratus, but that doesn't feel bad to me. So that removes a counter there. And then I think I like Serpent. So this is going to trigger Kiora, right? So we're going to look at the top 6, and we're going to play something with 6 or less for free. So ideally, we just want to get value, right? So automatically, Great Henge, right? We don't want to play the Swimmer for 0 because it's just going to die, and we can't play the Swallower. So it comes down to Joint Exploration or Arcane Signet. Joint, I can't kick, unfortunately, so it would just be Scry 2 and draw. I think I'll just play the Arcane Signet, which will also reduce, right, Arithmeses by a counter. Not bad. I mean, not ideal. We would have loved to have seen something like Eric's Uprising or, some of our value enchantments, but not bad. It does get another counter off of Arithmeses. And then now we know that, our serpents, or, our sea monsters are going to attack for a little bit more. Drawer can sacrifice itself to make a token of a copy, a creature we control. I don't mind that one. Could be a nice thing to copy something like Serpent. So I've got 9 mana. Remember, all my creatures are costing 2 less. So I could go 5 into Tomocratus and just see what we get. Tap the Arithmeses, right? 3, 4, 5. That would leave us with 3 mana left. Let's see what we get. We look at the top 7, right? Hullbreaker Horror is an option. Beans is an option. Leviathan's an option. The only downside of the Leviathan is it would bounce Goreclaw back to our hand, but I don't know that we really care about that. So it's either Hullbreaker Horror, Shipbreaker Kraken, or Leviathan. Man, I really love the idea of Leviathan. It basically would just bounce all of our opponents' things back to their hand. Serpent and Kiora could still attack this turn, probably into a completely empty board, right? We would bounce Goreclaw, but that's okay. Then on our next 2 turns, right, we're going to be drawing off of Leviathan. Leviathan would also, if we didn't tap Arithmeses, this would actually turn Arithmeses online this turn as well, which could be interesting. So I think I'm going to pick the Leviathan. There's probably an argument for up the beans as well, because then it could help us refill our hand. Now we're kind of out of these, but I don't think I mind. So here it'll get the counter right when it comes in. That's, like I said, bounce Goreclaw back to our hand. Arithmeses, like I said, is now a creature as long as we didn't use it for that. And then Tomocratus comes in. And again, now you attack with these 2. Right? Get in there, get some damage in. And now on this turn, right, we're drawing cards on whenever one of our Krakens, Leviathans, Merfolk, Octopi, or Serpent. So all of these are going to draw us cards when we attack. We drew Coma, so there's another way to trigger that. Remember, Coma isn't reduced right now because Goreclaw got bounced back to our hand. Reckless Seas can still tap for mana. But if I want to go... If I go 4 for Triumph, which I think has a chance to knock... That's 20. That's 18. I don't... It might be close. This could knock the entire table out. Because remember, all of these but Kiora can't be blocked. So if we think about it that way, this becomes a 9, this becomes a 7, this becomes a 9. This is guaranteed to knock one person out. These two are darn close. So we could actually swing these two at one person, these two at one person, this at one person. So actually Triumph may just be a full knockout right now, unless somebody has a response. And if somebody tries to respond by like nuking something, we just use the Heroic Intervention for the hexproof. So that makes sense. I was gonna say, if not, you go deep on the Coma, but I think that just makes sense. We could also get cheeky, like if we were worried about we didn't have this option, we were worried about blockers, we could always copy Leviathan with the Mirror Lake and, bounce everything back again. But I think we pretty much got there with the Triumph, and that's what makes Triumph so good, is it can help us, end those games in those scenarios. Here on playtest number 2, we keep it a 4-lander. Reliquary Tower is great in case you draw some cards. There's the Invasion of Zendikar, can help us ramp. There's Thrix to reduce our spells, and a Soul Ring. So I think if anything, this is a turn 2 what? Invasion of Zendikar? I'm thinking get an island and an island since we've got a forest in our hand. Just pick someone to defend that. Guess we'll get the Reliquary down just in case it matters. That's 7 mana. I'm thinking Pure plus... it might make more sense to go Cream first, wouldn't it? Cream and then Kiora. We would look at the top X, where X is its power, so that's 4. We get to put something back on top and put on everything else on the bottom. I don't mind taking a Great Henge, right? Great Henge is one of those cards that can really help us draw. Shipbreaker Kraken, I mean, Beans is great too. We got a bunch of cards in our hand that would help us draw off of Beans. We also would draw off of, Great Henge. I think I'm going to put the Great Henge on top. Again, pretty much just going to guarantee we draw it right next turn. All right, so the Henge is going to be a little bit too expensive to get down. It's 5 to get it down because of the reduction from that. But then I actually think I can get Thrix in if I do that, right? So if I go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I leave up 3 mana and then the 2 from Great Henge. So yes, I can get Thrix in this turn and draw. Sorry, the draw from... I would get the Cream trigger, which I probably would just do first. It's only going to be 4. Because the putting a counter on it is part of Henge's trigger. I think I'll just take AC. And then we put a counter on it and draw. Have Kiora try to flip this over is my thought. If somebody, can't block it over. And then we have this nice elemental now that can drop for mana. That's going to have Cream of the Crop go off again for 4. Ooh, Brineland's pretty great. I think that's what I'm going to do, because this will actually draw me off of the Henge. And this is why Henge can be so good. We also would have gained a couple life from the Henge. So now as we come back to our next turn, Thrix is reducing our 5 or greater spells, and they can't be countered. I've got, 8 mana, 10 mana. I guess I could play AC and then play the land, right, to draw a card if I wanted to. I'm just thinking if I play AC, I only have 4 mana. We could try to go for the Growth Spiral, I guess. Or 11 mana, sorry, because of the Skyclave. Well, it costs 1 less. So, yeah, I think that makes more sense. Play the AC first. So on cast, we're going to look at the top 6. Oh, Sphere Grid almost seems like the play here because of all these counters that are getting handed out to every creature that's coming in, giving them trample, right? Which is, I like Arithmeses, right? I kind of like the idea of getting the trample, right, from all these counters. And then AC comes in, again, getting a counter, but we'll do the Cream of the Crop first just to see if we can kind of get what we want. I like the Heroic to protect the board. And this is what this deck is trying to do, right? Get these pieces of value out so that you're affecting what you're putting down. So this, to my count, is 3, 4, 5, 6 mana left. I'm thinking grappling. I'm sorry, I played that. I haven't played the land yet, right? So we could still play the land, but I'm thinking about playing the grappling because then I can tap something down too. So we're looking at top 6. Kiora could help me draw some more cards. That's what I'm kind of thinking. Right? Grappling comes in. It's going to draw me off the Kiora and the Great Henge. But let's go for 5, right? Love the idea of the Nature's Lore just to get another land and draw another card off AC. I think it's my only legal target, right? So then counter, draw, right? Because of the Kiora drawing me a card too. So that was what? 5 plus 5 is 10. I think I said I had a, what, 11 mana? So I think I don't have enough mana to play the Nature's Lore. But I could untap Kiora. My thought is untap something with Kiora just to keep up the Heroic Intervention now. I can take the... Sorry. Oh, that's right. I play my land. Draw off of AC. Play my land. Draw off of AC. So now we have a couple more mana up. I could play the Nature's Lore and draw. Right? If I wanted to. I think I'd still leave up mana for that. Or I could go for something like Growth Spiral. Put the Willow Verge down in, draw. And again, I think we're just in good shape. We've got the Heroic Intervention to protect the board from literally anything but mass bounce. We come back to our turn. We have the Whelming Wave to pretty much block, to basically just bounce a bunch of irrelevant things of our opponents back to their hands. We would have enough mana to play like the Anomaly plus the Whelming Wave to really just wreak havoc, and I think we're in good shape on that one. Again, I hope you could see the goal of that there, right? Put these value pieces in so that every time we're casting these big spells, we're getting more than our mana's worth, right? 2-lander, but we have Beans and Farseek, so we've got some ramp. We've got Counterspell, the Big Fiend, and then Scourge. So I was going to say, we're not looking bad here, and I think the Soaring does help. I think we Farseek plus Beans this turn. Farseek just goes and gets a dual land. It doesn't really particularly matter. And then I think we just Beans, right, to draw a card. Just trying to get as much value as we can into our hand. Not a land there, but it would have been ideal. Play Kiora and draw, right? Because whenever you came mana value 5 or greater, right, we draw. Not too bad. All right, so would have been ideal again to draw land, but that's okay. I think it's just Kadama's Reach. Put an island in. Put a forest into our hand. And we haven't played a land for turn, so we can play the land. That leaves us 4 mana left. Something like the Unsealing, I guess. Not too much there. I guess we also could leave up Counterspell, but not ideal, but I think it's good to still set up even when we can't do anything more. Now we've got 8 mana. The Swallower. Scourge of Fleets is the bounce. I kind of like just the Swallower here. So that's 7. So that's going to cause us to... that uncast is going to cause us to draw 3. I think and Beans is going to have us draw 1 as well. I'd almost rather do Kiora's trigger first before I draw, just to see what I get. Okay, I'm thinking of the Anomaly, but I have a feeling there's not a ton on the board, so I'm kind of thinking the answer is the Arcane Signet. And then now 1, 2, 3 off the Unsealing, 1 off of the Beans. And I've got, what, 2 mana now because of the... I think I'll just pitch to hand size, hold up the Counterspell is my thought. Right? And then come back to our turn. And I love the Yawning. That leaves me with 3 mana left after the Yawning. Let's see where it takes us. Won't trigger the Unsealing. That'll just make us a couple spawns, but we'll draw here. So let's go 6 deep and see what we get. Cure is interesting, right? Fill our graveyard up a little bit and make that big 8/8. Love Whelming Wave. Whelming Wave could just be a good option here to just bounce a bunch of things back and clear the way. But it is only 6, so it's either Kiora, the Beast Within, or the Whelming Wave. Whelming Wave could set up a nice, alpha strikey type thing next turn. But Kiora's going to be really close to triggering next turn, right? It's a little bit of awkward into the Whelming Wave. I kind of like the idea of Kiora. These go to the bottom. I make the 2 spawn. Kiora comes in. I draw 2 and pitch 2. I'm just trying to think of what. It doesn't really matter at this point. And then the Serpent comes in, which we still draw off the beans, right? So I said I had 3 mana left. Kind of like the idea, again, of just keeping up the counterspell or the heroic. And that's going to leave... well, no, it's 5 because of the spawns. Does that make a difference? I don't think it does. I think we just pitch a land to hand size and hold up the counterspell or the heroic intervention just in case. Come back to our turn, because now Kiora can attack and make that big octopus token. I think we're just in good shape. So we come back to our turn. 3, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 mana. Lots of mana. There's that big deep sea kraken. Lorthos, when it attacks, can tap a bunch of things down. Scourge of Fleets is for 2 right now, so that's not as ideal. Elder Deep Fiend, when it taps up to 4 things when we cast it, that could be really good. Tap a couple things down and get some of these key attacks in. So 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So I've got 3 mana left. A bunch of draw triggers, but we get to look for 8 here. Oh, Triumph probably just... Does Triumph do it? Elder Fiend taps in, on cast taps 4 target things down. We're probably going to tap our opponent's creatures down no matter what. If I go for Triumph here, Serpent is a 7, Swallower is a 7, Kiora is a 4, Kiora is a 5. See, the Triumph here would knock probably 2 opponents out. And I've still got 3 mana up that I could use to protect the board in case somebody does something. And I get that 8/8 octopus off of Kiora that I can attack with next turn. Yeah, I mean, it may not excite some people, but I think Triumph's the choice. I mean, I'd probably pick the same if it was something like Stampede, right? But I think we picked the Triumph. Remember, this doesn't see the buff, but it doesn't matter because it can attack, right? And also, only certain things can block, right? Because of the Serpent, which may just make the difference. We draw 1, 2, 3, 4 off of Beans and the Unsealing. Get a land in. I've got 4 mana up. Again, I just hold up the counter or the heroic. We make that octopus on attack. And again, I think we knock 2 people out here. I'd love a world where it's 3, because these 2 can't be blocked either way. I think we pair them up with the things that can't be blocked and just, right? And just hone in. Pitch the things that may not matter now. I think Emoti still matters for the Cascade. Cascade could be really important. But I mean, 2 people get knocked out on that one, and the other person has to have something, and we've got multiple ways to deal with what they have. So I don't mind that one at all. But let me know, what do you think of Kiora down in the comment section below. Again, I think the deck's going to get better over time as we get better as these sea monsters. Again, I love the new additions. Starwinder is a ton of fun. I love Summon Leviathan. I actually almost did the deck for Final Fantasy, and I'm glad I waited, because we got, again, a couple new, fun Leviathans that are really going to help out. But let me know, what do you think of Kiora? And I will catch you on the next